Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So ultimately, when it comes to Palantir, we're investing, or at least I'm investing in it, because I have that belief that they have the potential to totally dominate the data analytics industry. Definitely when it comes to using AI to sift through data and to provide answers beyond the typical SaaS businesses could do at the moment. And this is all really from my own intuition, from doing my research, because at the end of the day, Palantir is not a company like Apple or Amazon or Tesla we can point to and understand, okay, we use these products, we understand how they're differentiated, but Palantir is ultimately a software company. They're work for the government industry, which is also very private. So it's much harder to just use it and to have that moment of, wow, this product is really better than anything else. So I think it takes a lot more in-depth research, understanding the management, going through their interviews to understand what Palantir is comparable to its competition. Because when you just look at the financials, I mean, 30 to 40% growth rates are great, and their financials and business model and all that looks very good. But still, when we're investing in it for it to be really a behemoth company, we have to understand that we want them to be a little more than just good. And I think as time goes on and as different interviews come out, I am understanding more about their business and business model. And ultimately, I'm kind of seeing that while other SaaS businesses are really focused on the easier problems that companies have to deal with and the sifting through data, and this is kind of, they're going to face a wall when it comes to the world changing, which in an interview that I'm about to show and comment on, Alex Karp talks about the changing landscape of the global environment and then also about its competition. But this means these companies are going to hit that wall and they're not going to be able to then deal with some of the hardest problems that companies will be faced with. While I think Palantir is kind of coming at it from a whole nother way, that they're solving the most complex problems. So they already did the hardest work. And I want to watch a few clips from an interview yesterday between Alex Karp on a podcast where he really gets more into details about the competition. And from this interview, I think I'm really getting some more pieces to the puzzle where Palantir is relative to their competition and how that will play out for them into the future. So let's watch a clip, and in between, I will interject with my comments.
I think, as much as I would like to, so I'm saying but we would like to become more maybe subconsciously able to fit into normal structures. That's just not something that I believe we're differentiated at. And although the world has been with kind of episodic interventions, more benign maybe in the past, certainly in the past than we believe it will be in the future, the not so secret of Palantir is an affirmation of our ability to do a narrow set of things, we believe, in a way that really no other company at our scale does them, and no other company seeks to do them because it's still so far outside the norm. But it's an area where we feel comfortable. And that part of that, not all of it, but part of it is building software products around the assumption that the world will become more complicated, more disjoined, more unhinged, where legitimacy is more point specific and not global, and where the legitimacy of institutions has to be reasserted, recreated with a certain kind of facticity, because there's no ability to just say, well, look at the past and how well we were. You have to actually prove that there's output. And our software products, the major ones that are known, PG, Foundry, but obviously the ones that are less known, the ones we're using with the special forces, both on the back end and the front end, products that we're building to deal with specifically disjointed environments that we haven't shipped yet, and building software for the edge, are specifically built with the idea that tomorrow will be it'll be a step function in terms of complexity, where the step function, it will be accelerated because of disjunctions and lack of legitimacy. of major institutions, and that other software products are built as if the world would be more static, more reliable, more certain, more able to deal with simplicity. Ergo, sales will be dominant, product complexity and innovation will be much less important than the sales and the way you pretend your products are, and that our sweet spot of doing this will become more and more valuable over time, more valuable tomorrow than it was yesterday. And that, by the way, has an important feedback loop, because it means we can keep the culture of Palantir the way we like the culture to be, i.e. one that sustains highly individual, often differentiated in the terms of their personality, people that are very, very focused on technical issues that most people, including most experts, do not believe exist. And so like we have this problem in our interaction with people that is very different than other companies, I think. The problem that other companies have, broadly speaking, is they have to convince people that they'll be able to build products that are relevant tomorrow. Which, by the way, is much harder than people seem to think, especially analysts have this weird idea that building software is like writing an analyst report, or lawyers think building software product is like handing in a brief. You can just hire one law firm to do it. If the other law firm, it's just factually completely not true. But the problem, so a normal company has is trying to convince people that they will build things that they're not going to build tomorrow, because it's not actually in their DNA. The problem Palantir has is convincing people that they need something that they will need tomorrow. And these are very, very different problems. And we're very focused as a company on this, delivering things we believe you will need tomorrow, building on our internal view of what we're good at and what we've shown we're good at, whether it was, I went through the whole history or at least part of it, while then often figuring out ways to modulate the product so that people who want parts of the product that maybe are a little bit more refurbishing your 90s enterprise-like can also have refurbishment. But it's not, refurbishment of your 90s IT architecture is certainly something you can use a modulated part of Palantir for, and it's a very important thing for kind of growth in certain parts. But our real differentiation is productive oddity.
So ultimately, Alex Karp is talking about how we're getting into a lot crazier of a world, which will put a lot of pressure on companies and definitely government institutions in the Western world. And this makes sense when we see kind of the power politics that are taking place between China, Russia, the US, and all that. And at the same time, we're so interdependent when it comes to supply chains and companies working abroad that this will create a huge hassle on companies and the way they've been operating till now. And Palantir ultimately is the perfect company to come into this and deal with these issues and to give companies the best answers they would need in a world like this, which is really beyond anything a company could imagine right now. And I almost like going back to Palantir investing in gold. A few months back, we were wondering why gold, why not Bitcoin? And it could be that their data analytics showed, okay, if you put this, if M2 money supply is this, then this is what ultimately the Fed will do, and this is what happens based on the history and all that, and it comes to the conclusion that we're going to have crash in assets. Like, who knows? It could be that they knew this before just because of their ability to sift through all the data and come to really great conclusions, and that's why they bought gold. So I'm very impressed with Palantir, their ability to kind of foresee the future, and it seems like they do see a future where Palantir will play a much bigger role because of the complicatedness inside the world that we're going. And when it comes to competition, he really says that other companies they're more static in their product offerings, and it's more needed in a certain world. And this kind of is something I saw. For example, I've been doing a lot of research on Snowflake, and I watched some videos on Snowflake's implementation of their SaaS business. And you really see that it's just, they have a product that they have, and companies kind of connect into their software. as opposed to Palantir, where they really get down and they deal with the complexities of what each company has to deal with, more specific to them. And he talks about how this is like their culture is built around complexity and innovation and kind of dealing with issues that aren't even issues yet.
Sales isn't a dirty word anymore, but somehow you grafted that on to the strange company that can produce these products. How's that transition been, if I've got it right?
Well, you do, because you're differentiated and somewhat living in your own outside world, doesn't mean you can't learn from more normal people. Although I'm not including you in that normal person. I know you want to be included in that, but I honestly think you wouldn't be hanging out with us if you were as normal as you claim to be. But in any case, but you're very good at presenting yourself that way, and I'm very jealous of that. It's like the more we do this. So we have this for a long time, and we've entered the government market, and then we've entered this market, and there are many markets where we are the de facto product people buy. Not all markets. What you see is in the beginning, I thought we were differentiated in building the software and getting people to adopt it. And I do think we are differentiated in building software, again, software that becomes more and more relevant over time, and getting people to adopt the software right before they inherently understand its full value. So that's essentially, in more vulgar terms, getting people to adopt something that they will understand tomorrow better than they understand today. I do not believe we are differentiated in getting people to understand something that they understood yesterday and need to understand better tomorrow. And that because we've been, in all candor, so successful at this one thing, and because in over 2 decades of doing this, we believe no one else does what we do, it's much easier to be open and like, okay, we do this, we don't do this. And there are people who are very, very good at some of the stuff we don't do, like conventional sales. So, my essential pushback on sales was like my pushback on going public for a long time. It was like, how do you do this while maintaining our culture? My version of that was you couldn't do that. We didn't know how to do that in the 10 years ago, 18 years ago. But it seems like the thing we do is become more recognizably valuable. And that gives us a wider range of motion to also partner with people that do things but the key is, how do you do it without corrupting the internal culture that must stay reminiscent of the way it was in the beginning and rejuvenated to deal with new problems? That is a culture of product innovation and complexity.
So first of all, as we see him spinning that thing, I think that kind of plays into his eccentricness, and really you can see the whole interview, he's kind of just shaking there, and you kind of see that he's not your typical CEO. And this is something I really like, not just because of that, but because of all the things that comes with it. And it comes back, like, you can kind of see the genuineness in certain CEOs, like Steve Jobs was, Elon Musk. Like, these guys are just different, and I really think Alex Karp fits into that. And he talks about how they really focus on the innovation itself, while other companies are more focused on the sales. And he discusses not going public earlier, or why they weren't really focused on sales. And it's because he wanted to make sure that they're focused on product innovation, because ultimately they're dealing with solving some of the hardest problems. And if they have, for example, the market and the short-term profits that are focused on, and you have to go and for sales, you only kind of focus on what the customers need, as opposed to you sitting there understanding what the problems are beyond what the customer even knows, and then solving all of this. And kind of now that we see they came public and now they're growing their sales team, we can kind of infer that they're reaching a point where they're a lot more confident, and he says this, in their product offerings. And because of this, now they're going out and showing customers what they need. And this is even beyond showing a customer this is what you need, because here's the data that you can input, which most other companies would do. They have the data and they say, okay, based on this data, you input it to the cloud, and we're able to provide you this and this with our analytics tool. Here it's more, showing them something they don't even know they have yet. And this is really, I think, the differentiator between them and, for example, a Snowflake, where it's in one of the modules that I was watching, they have Datalytics that inputs bike data that of bikes kind of around, I think it was the UK, and it provides them with pretty much a more efficient operating system. But it's answers to problems that are very much seen and collects the data and filters them very nicely. But I think Palantir is really going a step further, where it's finding the issues that aren't even understood yet. And this is what Alex Karp is saying, that it's really the culture, and they wanted to always make sure to keep this. And now they're at a point where they believe they will keep it, even though they're going public and focusing more on sales.
So I want to dig down into the companies. I want to dig down into the commercial business of yours, and if you're going to let me, a little bit on the military national security side. I think where we agree on the financial piece of it is there's going to be a bill to pay. There are no free lunches, and the more direct we can get the money to those that deserve it, the better off we'd be. But let's dig into the business. So on your commercial business, I'm going to take a shot at your competitors for a minute. Or your would-be competitors. Some of them have a lot of nice products. It strikes me as the non-technologist, their products are narrower than yours, maybe more easily digestible, certainly more easily saleable. How do you think about, the Snowflakes of the world, the Databricks of the world, and that product suite, as it were, compared to yours?
Well, that's both a shot at them and a could be a legitimate, critical, interesting question about Palantir. Our products are deeper than any other products on the market. Have an institutional veracity that's differentiated. Are doing things that are arguably more important. I don't think that's really subject to debate. I do think what is a legitimate question is if a product is future oriented and requires a depth of understanding of the product, and or it doesn't inherently map to selling a wrench to a pre-existing technical org, will you capture the full value of those products? So I think you can ask the critical question of various companies. You mentioned too, there are many. Are the products actually thick enough to be valuable? You could ask the question of Palantir, is it thin enough to be fully monetized? And I think both questions are legitimate. What I would say is our view at Palantir is we're very differentiated in building these products before they exist. And on the thick part, we are without competition. So then there's a question of are we able to supply parts of our product or various products, for example, products that we're building now, products that we have in Foundry, to an enterprise that may in fact prefer something that fits into their architecture that is thinner. That gets into a very legitimate question, which is, okay, forget now. It's like, is Palantir building the product of the future, but willing to supply into the current environment by providing products that are more digestible into an organization that maybe it wants to go their own way and wants to buy a certain product for a certain thing, but does not want to buy all of Foundry. By the way, and so the answer in the near term has been yes. But in the future, we are going to continue to focus very much on what you're calling kind of thick, future-oriented products because they're differentiated. But then as the parts of this product become less differentiated and more, for lack of a better word, commodity, like there's 8 companies that supply them, figuring out ways to decouple the product and sell these things in a modular way, partly because there's an assumption which is just not true that is very intuitive, that if you have a full stack product, that the sums of the product are less valuable than if they were taken apart, i.e. that each wrench, each part of that product is inferior to a product that's just that product. But it's actually not true at all. It's actually the opposite. And part of what we will be doing over the next couple of years is both continuing to build things that are not understood sell them to deal with the macro conditions that you have outlined, that I agree, but also democratizing parts of our product so that people who want a different version of the product can also buy it. We're not super ideological there, as long as our core mission is to continue to be entrepreneurial outsiders in the product realm, which is where, again, we would like to continue to stay in a world where we're not competitive.
Yeah, I mean, if I've got this right, if you could disaggregate the solution into various products and you could make one product thin enough, you could just slip it under the door, then the guy who's got to buy it on the other side might say, yeah, that works pretty well. And then you're in the enterprise versus just banging on the door and saying, really, this is
the our version of that is, well, first of all, the larger product is particularly valuable where dislocation happens and your institution will die. So there's going to just be an increased demand for that. But we are in the business of building software, and if you want, and then now we're going to figure out in the future, how do you also disambiguate the products in a way that people who just want to buy parts of it can buy, and that's never been a contradiction for us. Honestly, every successful business that ends up being massively so not Palantir today, but Palantir in 5 years, what we will be, it starts with the world's most complex problem, figures out solutions for it, and then figures out a way to do that tomorrow and the next day while allowing people to buy parts of it that are arguably less complex. And that's how you build not a business that is where we are now, but a business that is 10 times, arguably 20 times bigger.
I think this is one of the most insightful things when it comes to the interview, that he again discusses how their products are a lot deeper and the problems that they solve are a lot more complex than your typical SaaS business does. But also that, because when we look at this, we can say, well, Palantir, maybe their TAM is not big enough because they're only going after solving the hardest problems, which is, let's say, Western institution, governments that have to deal with this, and some of the biggest companies, but most of the companies aren't that big and have smaller problems. But he's basically saying that you can really break up Palantir. I mean, they have over 50 different offerings when it comes to Foundry and Apollo and Gotham, and you can break it apart, and the smaller companies that don't need the more complex answers could still use these. But as time goes on, they'll kind of realize the benefits and start to expand within that. And I think this is kind of the business model of Palantir, that they're really, once you're able to fix the most complex problems at an extremely efficient way, then fixing the easier ones is pretty much a simpler task, obviously. And a lot of other companies are at the moment they're more narrow, they're more saleable, like they were saying. But when it comes to then the more complex problems that ultimately they're saying the world is going to bring going forward, then this is where they're kind of reach a barrier where Palantir is really coming from the other way, where they're able to solve the more complex ones, and then it'll just go downstream and make it a lot easier. And he talks about the sum of the parts being bigger than it all being together. And this is something I also believe, because if you look at Amazon, if you take out AWS, e-commerce, their streaming and all those things, I think the sum of the parts would be bigger. And the same with Facebook, if you split up Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp and all that. And ultimately, this is how he says the business could very well scale to at least 10 to 20 times bigger than what it is today, by kind of incorporating all of these different modules, offerings to different businesses that will need it, and then they will expand. And ultimately, I think that Palantir is really at the beginning phases of their expansion. The obvious macro environments are affecting the markets the way it is. But again, we're looking at the long term. So this is my belief. I'll be investing, not investment advice, but I'm very excited about the future. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this helped. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.